Hey guys, welcome back to my channel and thank you so much for watching. Today's video is going to be a tutorial on how I made this Paw Patrol cake featuring Chase. So let's get right into it. I'm going to start with making my cake topper. So I'm going to be using blue, brown, a lighter brown, black, yellow, and some pink. To start Chase's body, I'm going to use my darker brown fondant and I'm going to add some Tylose powder to that just so it helps set up a bit faster. Once I kneaded that in, I started to shape my fondant into a kind of sausage shape. I've got a foam cake tier with a skewer and some wax paper, and I'm just going to skewer that through to help my figurine set up while I'm making him so he doesn't smush against my counter. You want to keep your sausage shape rather thin, you don't want to make him too bulky, and I'm trying to kind of make the chest part of him stick out a bit more and just to be a little narrow at the bottom. When I'm positioning him on my foam tier to set up to dry, I'm making sure that the top is slightly forward so he looks like he's tilting a bit, just because when you look at a dog and they have their paws down, their backs aren't completely straight, so just make sure that he's leaning forward just a tad. I'm going to set him aside to dry and then start on the head of my figurine. I added a little more Tylose powder to some brown fondant, and then starting off with a ball, I'm just going to start sculpting his features with my fingers. I looked at a reference photo for this. I am in no way a professional figurine maker, but I did my best and that's all you can do. Once I had created the general outline of his eyes and his nose, I grabbed a sculpting tool and I just marked in where I wanted his mouth to be. Chase has cute little cheeks when he smiles, so just make sure you define those as well. For the lighter fur on Chase's face, I grabbed some of my tan fondant and rolled that out, and then draped that over his face and smoothed it out, and using my X-Acto knife, I just cut around the cheeks and the eyes and down the bridge of his nose. Again, I just used a reference photo for this, and I will link that down below. Once I was satisfied with that, I grabbed my sculpting tool again and just re-outlined his mouth and kind of pushed in where his dimples would be at the corners as well. Next, I grabbed my balling tool and just kind of pressed in where I wanted his eyeballs to go. And then I just cleaned up my edges. If you have any stray pieces of fondant, just make sure you push those in so the whole look is nice and smooth. I always find that around this stage is when you're thinking, what have I done? But usually it starts to look like nothing, and then you'll add one thing and all of a sudden it looks like something. So taking some black, I'm rolling out a little ball and then kind of shaping that into a triangle nose shape, and then I just use some water to adhere that to his face. For his eyes, I rolled out some white fondant and then used a piping tip to cut out 2 circles. I added 2 smaller circles of that light tan fondant for his iris, and then using some brown food coloring and a fine tip paintbrush, I just painted around his iris and then kind of dragged that into the center, but not all the way. It just gives a little more dimension. Add 2 small black dots for his pupils, and then roll out 2 small little balls of white fondant and put those right into the corner, just so it gives it a little more life. It looks like the light reflecting. So I'm going to set that aside just to firm up a bit, and then going back to his body, I've rolled out some blue fondant and I'm going to kind of cut that out into a long strip and then wrap that around the top of his body for his little policeman's outfit. I'm wrapping that so that the seam will be in the very front because he has a zipper, so I can cover that. His hind legs were a bit tricky and I probably would have done them differently, but for these ones I just rolled them out into a ball and then flattened them. And then Chase has 2 tones on all of his legs, so the bottoms have the light colored fur, so I'm taking my tan fondant and then just wrapping the bottom half of that disc shape, and then using a sculpting tool I'm just kind of dragging the edges up so it looks more like fur versus just like a flat thing of fondant. For his front legs, I'm rolling out long sausage shapes and then again just wrapping the bottoms of those with the light colored fondant. Make sure you're holding the legs up against his body just so they're not really long. Chase is by no means a super tall dog, but he's also not crazy stumpy either. For all 4 paws, I've rolled out balls of the light fondant and then just kind of smushed them down, and using my X-Acto knife, I just kind of pressed in the paw indents. I'm going to leave that to sit for a sec and move on to covering my cake in fondant. I've already covered my cake in icing, and if you need to see how to do that, you can check out my previous videos. I am just rolling out some of that navy blue fondant on my cornstarch surface, and then I'm going to drape that over my cake, and using my hands and my fondant smoother, I'm just pushing all the air out from the top and then working my way down to the bottom, just pulling out the skirt and continuously smoothing that with my hands until I've reached the bottom. Trim away any excess you have with a sharp knife, or I'm using a pizza cutter. You can see here that I've added Chase to my cake now, or the body part of him, and I'm rolling out some gray fondant and just a really thin strip of that to be the zipper, so I'm just going to cover up my seam. taking more of that brown fondant and I've rolled out a little piece for his neck. I'm using water to attach all of my pieces here, but you could also use piping gel. And to make his neck match his head, I've rolled out some more of that light fondant and then just cut out a little piece so it's still that nice two-toned. I've added his head, and while I'm waiting for that to set up a bit, I'm using my X-Acto knife and marking in the zipper pattern on that gray strip of fondant. I rolled out some black fondant and cut out a long strip, and I wrapped that around the base of his neck for his collar, and then I rolled out 2 more little itty bitty pieces of black fondant for his eyebrows. Using some blue fondant, I shaped the top of his hat. I can't really describe this shape, but just look at a picture of him and you'll get what I did here. I used some black to roll out the visor part of his cap, and then I started to make his ears. I just used some brown and shaped kind of like pointy triangles. He has quite pointy ears, so make sure that they're nice and big. I then rolled out the pink and added that to the inner part of his ear. I grabbed some more of that blue fondant and rolled it out into a long thin sausage shape and added the cuffs for his sleeves. I finished off his cap by adding a thin rope of yellow fondant to the top of his visor and then 2 little black patches to his uniform as well on either side. I rolled out a gray triangle shape for his badge and then another blue one as well for his collar tag. I'm taking some black fondant and rolling out a really long strip to go all the way around the top of my cake. I'm making like a large version of his collar. And to help me keep the line straight, I just used a cue card and I kind of held that all the way around my cake as I was brushing on my water, just so I knew that I was keeping a generally straight line. And then I just slowly added that black all the way around and just kept kind of checking it to make sure that I wasn't putting it on crooked. You can see that I'm adding the gray strip to cover that seam and start the top of his tag. And just as I was cutting out the rest, my camera decided to die and I didn't realize it. So you can see that I've cut out some gray in the shape of his tag, and I will link the picture that I used down below as a stencil. And then I cut out some blue in the same shape to go on top of that, and also a yellow star. I used circle cutters to make the paw prints on this cake. And then when I added the badge to his cap and his little tag on his body, I used some white food coloring with a fine tip paintbrush. I just used the back of my paintbrush for the white on his top badge. And then for his little collar, I mixed that white with a little bit of yellow food coloring and just drew on a rough star. I also added a tail, which you can't see, but for that I just rolled out a long rope of that dark brown fondant, and then I pointed one end and added some of my light brown fondant to the end of that, and then again just kind of used my sculpting tool to drag the fondant up to look like fur. But this is how he turned out. I'm really happy with this cake, and I really hope that you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching.